Not Titles podcast is proud to be sponsored by Land Trust Title Services, your partners for results. Hello, hello. This is Steve Kemp with the People Not Titles podcast, and we are here with Vince Auricchio with Auricchio Law Offices. And Vince, glad to have you on this Monday.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Yes, so I was really intrigued, Vince, with a blog that you had, and people can go to, what's your website?
Sure, it's reallawchicago.com.
Reallawchicago.com. You had some really intriguing posts about commercial real estate. And I thought it was really timely. We just had Land Trust. We just had a commercial CLE where we had a lot of activity, a lot of questions. We had a lot of agent interest in the CLE. So commercial real estate is something that I think you see residential agents crossing over to.
Yes.
And I think if they're going to do it, they have to have an attorney that knows what they're doing.
I would
agree. Which can
agree.
up. So if you're like a 6 on your commercial real estate knowledge, Vince Auricchio can help you to be a 10.
Well, that's kind of it.
Yeah.
Any real estate attorney who does commercial work, I happen to do both, but can absolutely assist an agent. You know, it's a teamwork approach. You look out for each other and you keep track of deadlines, but sure, you definitely want an attorney who's done commercial work to do a commercial deal rather than initially just a residential attorney switch into a commercial deal. Now, I guess you could say if you had a very strong commercial real estate agent who wanted to guide a new or residential attorney switching to commercial, I could get there. Mm-hmm. But somebody's got to be really experienced in the commercial realm, whether it's the agent first or the attorney first.
Awesome. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, Vince, is just a little bit of the state of Chicago real estate. And you mentioned, I think, in your post, it was somewhat dramatic, right? Yeah. Are we looking at the death of commercial real estate? And particularly, you're kind of referencing Chicago.
Yes, I was.
Okay, so what prompts you even to ask that question?
Sure. Can I, shameless plug, we are also on WJOL in Joliet, and I was very careful, so Steve, you just nuked me, okay? But I was very careful in the radio show just to change that word to death to decline.
Decline.
No. Are we seeing
the decline?
Because you don't want to scare people. But,
no.
You are right that my blog did say death for the very reason you said, to be dramatic.
Yeah, and actually, I think it's actually maybe the way to look at it is kind of the death of the way we knew it to be.
Sure.
And it's always going to be there. Yeah, it's changing and it's morphing. And so the old way of doing it, the old way of how properties are valued or how deals are done are changing. And so let's just talk about that.
You got it. So the truth is, you can't in even like a 20-minute discussion or even like a 200, 300 word blog cover everything. And a lot of the things that we're going to talk about are just like a funnel, like a culmination of everything that's been in the newspapers or the news already. Mm-hmm. But we synthesize it, and that's where we came up with what was in my blog. First, what everyone knows, COVID changed everything. Mm-hmm. The WFH, I joke that's not a curse word, it's work from home.
Okay.
The work from home.
It's not some more Illuminati organization.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Okay.
The World Health, the WHO, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So really, and then once I say it, everyone watching, or you would be like, not duh, but I know that. And that's my point. There's nothing super, insightful that I have, but if you culminate it, if synthesize it, first, people aren't coming in as much. Mm-hmm. Hybrid, they call it hybrid work schedules, mm-hmm. is partial or work from home completely. Mm-hmm. And then my understanding is that you have businesses in Chicago with multiple floors or even just a full floor that are empty. Mm-hmm. And then you have companies that have to report to shareholders to justify their assets or their space or their usage. Mm-hmm. And then you have shareholders or bigwigs from the companies walking around seeing empty space, and they're saying to themselves,
what am I doing?
What am I paying for?
Yeah.
Why are we doing this? Which doesn't affect the current lease, but it affected the triggers, the changes in the leases at the end of the end term in 23 and what's coming in 24, which then affects, as our blog said, the commercial mortgage-backed securities market, the CMBS. So first, you have changing work environments, whether it was caused by COVID or an increase in technology, and you don't even have to blame COVID. What if you just say, you know what? It may have happened 5 years sooner, but the second everyone developed and found Microsoft Teams and Zoom, this was coming anyway. The work from home model was going to come anyway. The thing is, and you know this, it was all over the news media, once the government shut everything down, power to the people. No, the workers didn't come in and they got used to it. And there's pushback. There's pushback on companies. People don't want to come in. And then what was the argument, Steve? The argument was, well, you're more productive in the office. What I understand is there's been a lot of data that says that may not be true.
And I think also from if you're a local brand, now you're able to expand your search and talent search to nationwide. And so now there are teams that are winding up in Chicago offices in Colorado. I just met with a large commercial law firm that said, we have a bunch of attorneys that are operating out of Colorado or over here or over there. So it is changing from a standpoint of owners are saying, how do I leverage this for our benefit? And they're doing it.
Yeah, and we can get into how it affects landlords in a second. We can get into how it affects negotiating commercial leases in a second, or commercial sales contracts, frankly. But before we even go in there, there's a macro effect. A lot of people aren't talking about this because, it doesn't touch their lives. Like I'm not mad at the government, honest. Why? I'm not a politician and I got to focus on making money for my family.
Totally.
So I focus on the micro, developing my business, developing my relationships, going to church. What's going on globally, not as impactful to me. Well, what I'm about to say falls into the second category. No one's worried about the subway, the shoe shine person, the dry cleaner, but every article I've seen, the mayors of these cities, New York, Chicago, Dallas, they are begging these companies, bring your people back because
restaurants,
there's adjacent businesses. You cannot have a functioning society or a city model without the workers coming in and going to lunch, getting their dry cleaning, getting their hair cut. And it was like the hub is the office lease, and then the spokes of
go out for drinks after the office.
Yeah, and I used to walk by this one place right on Madison downtown, and I was like, oh, that restaurant will never go anywhere. Well, if there's no workers, the restaurant's going to suffer.
Absolutely. So the work environment, work from home environment, has had a ripple effect that is pronounced.
Yes, but we can, we're just flowing here. It's not like we have our notes, but it's not like we were planning to go in this direction. But come on, man, when you're a worker, you save on the commuting fees, you save on the dry cleaning. For the ladies, I'm going to say this because Steve, I do my hair every day. You're one of the few people that has less hair than me lately. Okay, I have less hair. My wife made me aware. Working women, more than half the women who work, right? Who half of women work or more. Working women, they take an hour or more to get ready every day. Us guys, we don't really think about it. It's also the women in the workforce that really appreciate not having to go in, from what I've read.
Totally. And I think, just my experience on our team, I can't tell who's in or who's out based on productivity. In other words, people might be staying online longer, might be working a little bit later because they feel like instead of driving home from 5 to 6, they might be working from 5 to 6. And so, there are some debates about that, but I do agree. I know people in the city who are like, okay, they're begging me to come in and the data doesn't support it. Something else must be driving it. And it's the economic machine of the city trying to keep the city viable, vibrant, and money's flowing.
It's the truth of the macro. You got to have a functioning system. On top of that, you have to, the point we made before that is internally, you got to justify the use of the space and the spending of the money to farm out or use a whole floor in one of these beautiful Wacker Drive office towers, which, not that long, but I'm an attorney 25 years. It was the LaSalle corridor until about the year 2000. LaSalle corridor was where all the lawyers went and rented space. Then Wacker Drive started putting up these glass towers, and since the year 2000, I don't know how many, but if you just drive down Wacker Drive from the north branch of Wacker down to Congress, you just go down Wacker, you'll see just like a tunnel of glass towers, and that's all office space. And the latest vacancy, you tell me, you heard, you know what it is, right?
No.
Oh, well, the Cranes reported in their January, Chicago Cranes, Chicago's vacancy went up last quarter of 23, went up to 23.9%. 1 out of 4, nearly, 1 out of 4 floors, towers are empty.
Okay, so I'm a real estate agent. I'm sitting at home. I'm eating my Captain Crunch, watching this right now.
Having your best life.
Yes, living my best life. And I'm saying, okay, how do you feel like this is going to impact the brokers in the city? Obviously, things are going to change now. What's going to happen to these properties?
Well, you know, I lived through, and we both did, 06, 07.
Yep.
Ramping up to 08, 09 to the slowness all the way through 2012.
Absolutely.
And I understand there's plenty of real estate attorneys who picked up before 2012, but for me, that was it, Steve. I did personal injury. I have a litigation background. I did personal injury between 09 and 2012, while a lot of my real estate buddies, they went into bankruptcy and foreclosure law. So I can't answer your question except on what I saw historically from the past. So that's why I'm bringing up 08 to 2012. But what's the answer? Either A, these agents the commercial agents are gonna start to do residential, or the residential agents who were gonna go into commercial might not right now, or B, the cities and the landlords will create such incentives that there will be no, contraction of the real estate agents' total number, and the landlords will be creative, and the cities will be forgiving or more incentivizing, and the market will be the way it was, just the landlords will be really cutting deals and changing their expectations.
So there could be opportunities for potential buyers.
Yes.
There could be opportunities for people who want to rent. Do you think some of this commercial space will go residential?
Sure.
Yeah.
The answer is yes. Between 99 and 01, there was that. Well, I'm sorry. Between the late 90s into the prior to 2005,
There was a condo conversion
so
madness.
all those office towers going commercial condos, and then you saw the apartment converting into the condos. What was weird was but after the financial collapse of 2008, there was a lot of condo deconversions to apartment buildings too. But sure, my friend, I agree. Yes, you could see that.
Okay, and so that could mean opportunity for residential agents.
Yes.
A whole new swath, because right now you have this decline in commercial real estate,
or at least a
vacancy, rampant vacancies, and then you have this supply issue on the residential side.
Yes.
So someone could marry those two things up and say, voila, I have an idea.
And I'm going to say this as pure opinion, and I'll give my age because not that I am not a boomer, but I'm 53. But in living in Chicago since 1994, I have yet, no matter what's happened, guys, from the financial collapse and the recovery to, unfortunately, COVID and anything after, I've never seen the 20-somethings stop moving into Chicago.
I agree with you.
21, 22, 23, 24. Why do I say 21? Because if you don't go to college, you're working 2 or 3 years. Why do I say 22, 23, 24? Because if you graduate college, you move to the city, you might have a self-sustaining job. No matter what, in the last 30 years that I've been in this town, 94 to 2024, I've never seen the 20-somethings not want to keep moving in. So the conversions to residential condos and the office
Rental
space
units,
changing,
potential.
and the rental units, could very well, it's been consistent. And that's why people are like, well, wait, you know, and I don't live in Chicago presently, but like, you know, why would anyone, you know, older people than me, why would anyone want to move into Chicago? I'm like, you don't understand. People want to get out of the house, and this is life.
Yeah.
New York, Chicago, LA, Dallas.
Absolutely. Yeah, Chicago is still extremely popular.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into, I want to get into the nuts and anything else we want to cover on that, any stats you want to talk about, Vince?
You brought up conversion apartments, but I will say that some landlords are being really creative, whether it's green space, whether it's like, don't laugh. I'm not going to say Chuck E. Cheese is moving into an office tower, but my
that type
suspicion is you're going to see major creativity. And I understand, you know, there was that, what was the Disney fantasy, what was that Disney place called in River North? Do you remember? So right off of Michigan Avenue,
I do.
Disney built an amusement park in the city.
Yes.
I wouldn't be surprised if we started seeing things like that.
Okay, so creative entertainment
use of the
type
space.
things.
Yeah, you're going to see, you could see barbershops where there used to be office space on the same floor as an office.
Okay.
And then lastly, suburban versus urban. There was, in fact, data to support that whatever we just said about vacancies or whatever we just said about commercial space challenges is not happening in the suburbs. So we're in Oak Brook or any of the surrounding areas, you are not getting the same pressures that Chicago's getting.
And I do know just some firms off the top of mind come up that say, hey, because of the way that the city handled some of that, they were like, I'm going to move out to the burbs to make sure I can operate and function as a business.
Yeah.
And so there's some of that people said, now's my time to get out. My lease is up. I'm going to move to the burbs. So there's some of that happening, I know.
And then I wasn't here when Sears left Sears Tower.
Yep.
I wasn't here when McDonald's moved or built out Oak Brook, right? Like that's where their headquarters are. But we've seen quite a bit in Chicago in the last 40 years or
Migration.
so. Migration. You had leaving the city, back to the city. If it's true, maybe leaving the city. I don't know that to be true. And then when is the back to the city? And what I always say is, never count Chicago out, not that it's down, never count Chicago out because the young people want to be here.
Yeah.
And I don't just mean Lincoln Park, guys. I mean, you know, like down by the Bears.
West Loop, River North.
West Loop, River North.
Yeah.
You know, whether the Bears stay or not, down over there. The South Loop.
Yeah, South Loop is beautiful and booming. Yeah. So, all right, good. So good on that. Let's talk about some of the nuances of doing a real estate deal and to make sure that you know, just that the professionalism is kept and kind of the differences of residential and title.
Sure.
Or residential and commercial, sorry.
Sure. You know, and strong agents always help, and agents always do a great job. But in commercial, there's the extra layer of an LOI, called the letter of intent. And usually, even before the lawyers get involved, the agents will often help buyers prepare a letter of intent. It's basically the outline of the future agreement, the outline of the future contract. So one major difference, and I guess...
And all bets are off on an LOI, right? I mean, you literally, there's no RESPA attached to commercial deals. And so you can say, you know, I'm going to throw in the car, I'm going to throw in my bathtub, whatever it is.
That's right.
There's a lot of creativity in an LOI, or there could be.
Absolutely. You are the master of your offer, okay? Of course, it'll have the terms, such as amounts or time periods, you know, loosely some numbers regarding expenses, costs, taxes, but you can put anything you want in the LOI. And it's a pre-contract. It's a little weird if you think about it, but it's a pre-contract. It forms the rough outline of what I'm interested in to make my offer about. And then the seller side will review it, and they'll mark it up or send it back, and now what you have is the underlying guts of the offer. Quite different from the residential world, where the real estate agents are with their form contracts, which is how we do it in Illinois. That's not a criticism. That's actually a benefit for the
100%.
for all parties, and attorneys, but you have your form contracts where you write up your offer.
It's kind of a common language when you're doing a deal in terms of residential is that contract.
Yeah, yeah. and those contracts, whether it's the multi-board or the Chicago Association of Realtors, the CAR, those are the two major ones. I mean, there's a South Suburban board one, but a lot of people don't use that. So it's very helping residential. All bets are off in commercial. And Steve, I hope you don't get mad. I'm going to use it this way. I tell my clients and I tell everyone, residential is like a hot tub party. Everyone's just getting along. They want it to work. Commercial deals are like a knife fight.
Oof.
Every commercial deal I've ever been a part of, and I've had different parties. It's not like I've only been with one party and the guy is tough. Every commercial deal I've ever been with, the two sides look at each other and they go, I'm out to get you. I'm out to screw you. And it's okay because you are out to screw me. Let's get it on. And it's a knife fight.
Yeah.
And there's all these I know we haven't gotten
There's less emotion in it, right? And more
business.
More business and some cutthroat aspects.
Who can get over a term on the other?
Yeah.
I once had a client, I've been doing commercial work since 2002, but when I first started early, around 2003, 2004, 2005, I had a client say to me, hey Vince, I know you've been doing this a few years, but keep an eye out for the ticking time bombs. Because what lawyers do, and I don't, I have my nice form contract, I try to be as direct as I can, I'm prepared for this, but I try not to live by his philosophy. I got to go to church on Sunday, I live by a code, but he said to me, look out for the ticking time bombs. I know what he meant. Embedded in these commercial contracts are secret or vague or hidden deadlines that the other side's hoping you miss so they can do a gotcha and it costs money.
I see. Okay. So we have on a residential deal, you might add the appliances or something like that. But in a commercial deal, you could also include the business itself into the contract. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so it's not just about the property and the stuff that comes along with the property. There could be other elements to the transaction.
Agreed. And I've been blessed or fortunate enough to work on those. But then above and beyond the real estate is a business law viewpoint or need to analyze the business. Now, no, I'm not an accountant, and I always tell my clients, get an accountant to analyze the financials, but it's my job within let's say you're buying a dry cleaners, or you're buying a restaurant. It happens a lot with restaurant real estate. Or you're buying out a restaurant lease, so you're not even buying, you're helping someone with the lease and then the restaurant business. There's all the financials to go through. I get those items, but you got to send them to your accountant. You have to review it. I've never run a restaurant. I've never bought a restaurant, so I'm not interested in.
Yeah. So the financial mechanics of a deal and the profitability potential of a business, and whether you're getting the business for a right price or whatever it is, that's not your bailiwick and not your job.
But what is my job? Is to get all those due diligence items, to get all those inspection items, to get all those zoning items, and we'll get into it. But no, as the lawyer in that kind of deal, you are really the first line to make sure they're fully informed, and you can get into big trouble. Luckily, I have not, but you can get into big trouble if you don't get someone what you're supposed to as a lawyer in that setting. It didn't matter that it was numbers. You're not off the hook. You got to help them.
Okay, so let's talk about the elements of the contract.
Sure.
Why don't you go through that with us? Vince?
Before even looking at the contract, like in general, it's a sales agreement. You want to make sure the terms aren't vague or in general. Like I said, that sometimes those catch you. Of course, you have what's also in a real estate contract. You have the price. You have the closing date. More involved is in a real estate residential, it's called inspection, and you know this, but for the audience, in commercial, it's considered the due diligence period, because there's far more than just, what's the condition of the condo and interior, the floors, the windows, and the appliances. There's so much more in a commercial, and in your due diligence period, there's, we'll get into it, but you go over the financial details, you go over any legal condition issues, whether there's any defects, and frankly, in Illinois, a commercial seller has a little higher duty to disclose what's going on with the property than in the residential. Now, whenever we're sellers attorneys, we always try to limit that duty. Whether it's an as-is deal, or you try to say, I can only give you the financials for this certain number of years, the rest is up to you. So you do, as a seller's attorney and seller, try to limit your culpability in the due diligence period, but you're expected to do more. There's zoning issues, there's environmental issues, EPA, or so
history of the property type of thing. Was there a gas station here, or was this a dump site, or whatever it is?
Happens. I was going to bring up the gas tank. So if you don't think about it, but underneath the gas stations, underneath those pumps, are giant tanks, and they can be well insulated, or they could be an EPA hazard. And there's some popular locations in River North and in Chicago that a few years ago I was involved in with buyers interested, but so many issues with those underground tanks. So yeah, you have underground soil samples. We're getting into it, so I might as well say, you have to do your environmental review. There's 2 levels. There's something called a phase 1 study and a phase 2. A phase 1 is more of like a surfacey review. Phase 2 study, this is the inspection period for commercial, the due diligence period. Phase 1 and phase 2 environmental studies. You literally do boring samples. They'll bore into the ground to test the ground. You need the ground to sustain a certain number of weight, certain height of a building. So there's a ton involved in commercial.
And there could be, just like on a residential deal, you write out a check for $500 for the appraisal, whatever it is. With the due diligence period for commercial, there could be for a buyer quite a hefty investment just to find out if you're interested or if the property is viable for you. And that's all on you as the buyer.
Yeah, you have to hire an engineer, an environmental engineer, for a couple of grand at phase 1, and then it can go 5-10 grand for phase 2.
And the deeper you go, the more information you may need to make a qualified decision. And so all of a sudden you're like, okay, do I spend another 5 grand for this, or do I take the risk on myself? Those kind of things.
Exactly. And commercial real estate agents do, in fact, help facilitate that. Now, I always take a team-oriented approach. Of course, that's my pitch to fellow real estate professionals, including the agents I work with. I'm like with you every step of the way. But a good commercial real estate agent will stay not just alongside of me, but stay ahead of me, start asking for stuff for me to follow up on.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that includes all the scheduling the environmental review, scheduling the walkthroughs, gaining access for the architect and the architectural review, floor plans. So the agents do a ton, or sometimes, and it's funny you said it because I actually was on a commercial real estate deal with a brand new agent to commercial. They had done a lot of residential.
The People Not Titles podcast is brought to you by Land Trust Title Services, your partners for results.
And it was like I was the agent, okay? Because I was just like walking them through team-oriented approach, but they got to see it, and I think I blessed them.
That's awesome. And so the key is with you is to invite you in early. Invite your team in early and get them involved in the transaction as early as possible. You'll say, hey, you're not going to do it all for you, but here are the things that you need to watch out for, and all of a sudden, now you're introducing your team into the transaction to reduce liability and expense and all the rest.
I agree, and I'll even say, whether you're a new commercial real estate agent or not, you'll need me in sooner if your client and developer are newer or not. So to be honest, if you have a developer's doing it for 30 years, they're going to get me in much later because they're like, I want to save on attorney's fees. So they're like, I know what I'm doing.
I got all this. I'm good. Yeah. I'll bring in Vince when I need him. You're the closer. You come out of the bullpen.
They won't even contact me until after the LOI is agreed on.
Yeah.
Because why are we going to pay Vince if I know what I'm doing?
We got a boilerplate. We know what we're doing.
But if you have a first-time developer, or like 3 amigos, like 3 guys that want to get together because they've each owned a number of individual condos, and now they want to up their game, so they pool their resources, and now they're going to buy a building with a build-out. Those first-timers are going to need me earlier.
I see. Okay. All right, so we got that. We got anything else on the due diligence period?
Oh gosh, there's so much. You get what's called the title, insurance.
Very important,
very
critical.
important.
Yeah.
You know, the title insurance is a great pre-screening, I call it. These are not official terms. Pre-screening for the condition of the premises. You guys all know this, but mortgages, liens, taxes.
Yeah, much more for commercial properties. Do things come in like encumbrances, access, assignments,
rents,
yes,
rent
liens,
flows,
yeah,
liens,
yep,
past lawsuits,
yes,
unresolved dismissal orders from lawsuits that relate to a land. Because the bigger the project, the more units on a property, more condos in the building itself, the more apartments you have in a, you're gonna have a lot more evictions in a 15-unit apartment building that than you used to have in a 3-unit walk-up. So there's always like the bigger the project, the more paper trail.
Yes.
So the title is amazing assistance with that. Surveys are so important. Commercial real estate surveys are quadruple or 5 times the cost of a residential.
and they reveal a lot, even like with these access issues and things like that.
I'm so glad you said access. I had a deal once that didn't go through because of because my client couldn't get a cutout, a cutaway. So it was a corner property. He was going to build out some sort of business, and there was access. So on the corner, there was access from this road on anyway, but he wanted to get a cutout so that cars could exit this way. You know, just on a corner of a block, and the county or town wouldn't let him get a cutout. I don't know why, but they said no, and it killed the deal.
That is a deal killer.
He wanted not one way in and one way out. He wanted one way in, 2 ways in and 2 ways out. So cutaways, access, easements, which are called rights of way. And I'm more talking to the audience because Steve, you could teach me. You know more than I do.
I'm just brilliant with this stuff.
Yeah, but easements, surveys, any defects. You know, commercial real estate agents can't hide things. Commercial sellers can't hide things. But there's a difference between latent and patent. That's just known and unknown, and seen and not seen. Okay, so you have to disclose what, when asked, or by the terms of the LOI or a contract, or from a lawyer to another lawyer, when asked, you have to disclose the defects. But if you're not asked, you can lay low. But you're not supposed to hide things. Like you can't have a bug infestation and that day just spray, and then they scatter, and then you think you're going to get away with it.
Or water full in the basement, and you scoop it out, mop it up. It's a few dry days, and you're good.
Right. Or like damage to the ceiling. You have an
Yes.
ongoing leak, but you just slap some paint on it, and then you say nothing. If you, how about this? I got a better way of saying it. Anytime a seller has to actively conceal something, it's probably a no-no.
Should be
because
revealed.
And it should be revealed. And I have a different level for my sellers, because a lot of my sellers are very sophisticated.
Yes.
And they're smarter than me sometimes, and they think they're going to pull some maneuvers. And I like to say, anything that you've taken a step to do, you'd have to lie that you didn't do. We gotta say it.
Yeah.
Anything you've taken a step, fess up. And sometimes my sellers are like, Vince, the buyer's attorney didn't ask about that. I did that. I don't want to say anything. So I paper my file and I go, dear seller, I've advised you say something. It's up to you, because it wasn't in the contract and it wasn't asked. I said, I've advised you. You don't want to. This is, against advice of counsel, done. And my clients don't get mad. They're like, Vince, I'm just a better businessman than you. I know what I'm doing.
Okay, that's fine. And we like to operate, I think, in the spirit of treat others how you'd like to be treated.
Well, yeah.
And and that businessman might say, I've already priced that into the building. Well, then you reveal it if it's priced in. And there's no problem with that.
And there may be other lawyers watching who are gonna like blow up at this, but I'm like, but he goes, do I legally have to? I'm like, well, it's not in the contract, and they didn't ask it. But if I was selling your building, I would. And he goes, do I legally have to? I was, no, you don't legally have to.
Yeah.
I said, but this might bite you in the butt later. It's on you.
Yeah.
And we go forward.
Yeah. And it has a way, if we believe in karma or whatever, I think it has a way of, what goes around comes around.
Yeah. Well, always, please. Golden rule, right?
Yeah.
You want to treat those how you want to be treated.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of other things like documents you get. Now, Chicago's very, routine, but any of these municipalities, like Riverdale, Elmhurst, they all have their own little rules, and you really, really gotta go on the websites, or you gotta have an.
And when you talk about rules, are you talking about how you plan on using it?
Well, on permitting,
Yes.
zoning,
Yes.
So usage,
Yeah.
business licenses. So in Chicago, there's a certain way of doing things,
Yeah.
but I have noticed through the years that some of the surrounding municipalities are even more strict, more detailed.
Okay.
And you got to just follow all the rules. And the title insurance companies have wonderful sheets of information they provide to us, like what municipalities are provide what. Whether Riverdale has an onerous inspection, whether it's commercial or residential. So I had a deal where the buyer had their individual. This is residential, but for example, individual inspector per the contract makes sense. FHA deal, so FHA appraiser, which is like another level of quote-unquote inspector.
Yep.
And then Riverdale sends out its own inspector.
Wow.
So
And
three
Inspector
levels of inspectors.
Clouseau, or no?
Well, that is 3 inspectors for a residential. It's even harder with commercial.
Yeah.
Zoning is a big issue. I once had a little war story. I had a client buying a warehouse property that had been built out and zoned for small storage. Think like storage, individual little things, and they wanted to go to bulk stores. They wanted to go to much larger.
So
things.
same vein, but a little different nuance to the storage.
And in the city of Chicago, there's levels of storage facilities.
Wow.
And it took 6 months. And a lot of the
Pre-purchase, did they have to work that out?
In the middle of the deal. So
Okay, so you're helping. So this person buys the property, doesn't come to that conclusion. Now it's a lot harder to get things changed after you're on the clock.
I've had that happen, and in this deal they knew about. So there was actually a zoning contingency clauses are built into contracts. There was a zoning contingency, which means the buyer only has to buy it depending on this working out. So this particular buyer, who was sophisticated, he was protected. We had in the contract a zoning contingency. The deal was contingent. Buyer only had to go forward, and the deal was contingent on the alderwoman giving permission to convert it from small to big storage.
Wow!
But that took 6 months, and I was the buyer's attorney. The seller's attorney in that particular deal, or the seller, was smart enough to know that these zoning changes take time. They put into the contract, and my client totally agreed to it. I didn't tell him not to. They put into the contract that there's 3-month re-ups. Every 3 months they had to increase the earnest money that was non-refundable. Why? Because the seller didn't want to wait for you.
Have a bunch of buyers pass by.
Through.
Yeah.
So stressful. What was supposed to be a 3-month deal turned into a 9-month deal, and they had to keep upping the earnest money to be applied to the purchase price later, but was non-refundable if the deal fell through. Eventually, my client did get the zoning change, and it went through 9 months though.
Yeah. So all the things you're saying, Vince, is that it's complex. There's a lot of things that if you miss, it becomes costly.
Oh yeah. There's also the damage and condemnation clause.
Yes.
I only once in my life did a place get damaged during the deal. And so in all of our commercial contracts, there are these 2 paragraphs. Paragraph 1 that says when there's minor damage, and paragraph 2 is major damage. Minor damage in commercial deals can be any damage under $100,000. The buyer agrees to go forward as long as the seller takes care of it in a timely fashion, and it doesn't cost the buyer. I'm dumbing it down for not legalese, but as long as the buyer is not financially affected. Oh no! Then there's the over $100,000
tornado hits,
something
lightning,
hits,
whatever.
Insurance companies involved. You have repairs. I even had one where they were ripping the cup. So another deal was taking so long. These commercial deals take much longer than the residential. But you have build outs. Everyone understands this. Yeah. They were vagrants were ripping out the copper piping from this particular place to be converted. I got into there's an insurance clause. Oh my gosh, I got to remember. I wasn't prepared for this, but there's an insurance clause that there's a difference between theft and vagrancy. and they decided that and they only cover vagrancy.
Peaceful vagrancies?
Like
I'm kidding.
no, like squatters or broken windows to gain access.
Yeah.
Okay, the breaking of the window to gain access is not robbery. That's vagrancy. But the ripping out of the copper tubes from the wall is theft. We had a freaking months and months argument. Sorry to say freaking, but months and months argument with an insurance company. What is vagrant versus what is theft?
Wow.
Because the policy covered one but not the other.
Wow.
And that was a commercial deal with damage before it closed. And then the seller's like, I don't want to do anything. But it was such a sweetheart deal that the buyer pushed the issue. And the seller ended up assigning, giving over the ongoing insurance claim to the buyer because the buyer wanted the place so much they actually adopted the seller's
insurance policy.
Yeah.
Wow. And so, Vince, in your role as an attorney on the residential, you get your attorney fee on the buy side, you get some share of title insurance on the list side, plus your attorney fee.
For residential.
We have for residential. Now, on the commercial side, it's different because you got all these issues. So attorneys are typically paid hourly, right, on a commercial transaction. So that's typically, that needs to be worked out and all that, but basically there's a different consideration that you have the attorney on the clock, you got long windows of time going by with you doing a lot of work, and so that's another part of the expense and equation that people need to think about, right?
And sometimes commercial clients of mine from the past are like, Vince, we did so much hourly work. Can't you do this one flat fee? Steve, never say never, but, and everyone thinks lawyers are rich and they're driving around in fancy cars and have 3 houses, but dude, you can
only have 2.
You can take a bath, no. You can take a bath on these flat fees.
Totally,
because
and the big thing is you think you pulled the wool over your attorney's eyes by negotiating some fee, and now you got this work that no one wants to do anymore because it's like hours and hours of work you're not getting paid for. A workman is due his wage.
Yeah.
So
the few times I have agreed to do a flat for sweetheart clients who just always come back, they've been kind enough, and I say kind enough.
Recognize.
I'll do it for flat, and we agree, no joke, if it exceeds 50 hours, I can start to charge hourly.
Yes.
50 hours.
50 hours is a lot of time.
It's a lot of time on one deal. People say, well, that's only a work week and a day. No, you don't spend that much time.
Right.
You're not supposed to spend that much time on a deal.
No, you can't afford to.
But so you can do flat fee with a cap on the hours.
Okay.
You keep track of your hours. You prove your worth. You show your. We attorneys always keep track of our time. So you show them the time, and then they start paying. So it
works out that way. Yeah. So just to speak to the expense of it and the time and the energy put into that, because people are doing work. Anything else we want to cover on the contract, Vince?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you usually want to get a 90-day inspection period. Sometimes the other side will push back, and it's 60. You should be very careful to build in options, rights to extend timelines. It avoids the argument.
You find something, you want to have time to look further into it or whatever it is. There's a delay, you want to have a right to notify them and say, hey, we have a delay here, I need to ask for this extension. You got to watch your dates.
Yeah,
Could get
and
expensive.
there are sellers that'll be like, okay, but. So as a seller's attorney, you might want to grant those extensions, but you got to pay to play. There's a buy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Opportunity cost.
So I give you a 90-day extension. You need more time. You're going to blame the county. I'm going to blame that you didn't get the stuff to the county soon enough.
Right. You thought 90 days was enough time when we began. Right.
People start fighting and telling each other, you didn't, it's not my fault. The county hasn't done it. No. You didn't get the stuff to the county early enough. Then they start digging into your life. What you do when.
Right.
Because now you're costing everyone money. So a lot of good sellers attorneys will say, you got to up the earnest money, like that other deal I told you about. You got to up the earnest money. There are mechanics liens, plumbers, electricians. A lot of people have subcontractors do things, and that can pop up not only on the real estate, not only the title work, but if it's been recorded beforehand. So you have considerations regarding debts due, past workmen. So I mean, you know, the real estate taxes are always interesting when you have a conversion of a property from one type to another, when you have an expansion of a property, or you have a brand new property. The title companies are all over this. They know more than I do. But for the audience, you know, when these municipalities, or these counties, I should say, are billing 1 year behind, the negotiation on the taxes can get dicey. And
The proration of it, right?
Proration.
Yes.
And I have a solution, which everyone hates, but the reason why I push it
Except
is
for your clients.
it's the most fair, and it is the escrowing of the money. You just set aside the money for taxes. And
and say, you say it's going to be this, I say it's going to be this. How about this? Whatever it is, it is.
And here's what the sellers
Let's not use it as a negotiating tool. Let's not argue or try to look at the crystal ball and figure out what it's going to be.
Yeah.
What it is what it is. Let's put the money aside. If there's less, you get it. If there's more, you owe me.
Stephen, this may, I think everyone will understand, I'll be detailed, but this is nuance that I don't know if you're aware of, but over the course of the years, I've been getting such pushback on the escrow that I got the magic bullet solution, and it's give me 100% proration now, and we'll only escrow 20% or 10% or 30%. Shuts everyone up, because sellers are going to say, well, I don't want to overpay, and buyers are going to say, but I need the money to help me close, because it's a credit at the closing table. It lowers how much the buyer's going to pay. And everyone's like, too much uncertainty. You know what? Let's just do 100% taxes, and we'll park 20%, and we'll fight over the 20% later. And everyone's like, okay. And they get mad.
Yeah,
because they don't want an escrow.
Right. That makes too much sense. I'd rather argue about it.
Yeah. So you have that.
Yeah.
You know, the governments are real muck.
And Vince, just to pause on that, that's a really great, that's the first time I've heard that, by the way.
I was hoping you would say that.
That's the first time I've heard that. So how often do people grab it?
How often do people grab what?
Just what you said. Do they just say, let's do that? Or do they die to it and go, oh, let's go 105 or let's go 110? How often do they grab you that option and say, let's do it?
Because that option is, thank you, great question. I think you already know the answer, but there's two sides, right? There's the buyer and the seller.
Yes.
Because that option gets buyer 100%, they're fine with it.
Yes.
I'd say most of the time it causes a seller to just say, they give an extra percent and get the freak out of there.
Okay.
They don't like it.
They don't like it.
Buyers like it.
Yeah.
Because it's certainty, fairness, and then later. But how often I notice the sellers will say, oh, fine, I'll just give you an extra 5% and move it up. So it actually
They want to be out of it,
because they want to be out of it.
Right.
No seller wants to be back in a year.
Right. With taking the risk.
They just want to move on.
Right.
And here's the problem, though. Sorry for the Papa Shop LLCs.
Yes.
But they want these developers and sellers, if they're sophisticated, they want to close things out in the tax year.
Yep.
And close their LLCs. Now, we could fight or argue later if we think this is shady. But what sellers or developers or developers do is they form an LLC for one
or that
project
property.
only,
Yeah.
and they want to be out.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, they don't bite it. It's not as genius a move as I thought it was.
Right.
Because the sellers don't want to do it.
Right.
Because they want to close their books. They want to close the LLC.
So it does reveal some of the hidden motivations behind it, because it is the cleanest way to do it. It's like you're really paying for what it's going to be, but they're like, okay, I don't want to pay for what it's really going to be. I just want to get to a number and agree and be out. Okay.
Over. Now,
that's good. That's nuance, though. That's the dance of getting the transaction done.
In residential.
Yeah.
You said in commercial how it always works in residential. The residential sellers or the residential sellers attorneys are like, that's fine. That's a good idea.
That works. Yeah.
That's a good idea. Vince.
Yeah. All right.
But now, if I tell everyone, then it's not going to be my idea anymore.
Well, you know what? You'll be the father of the idea in Wikipedia.
Yeah. Well, there's other things too, Steve.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, sometimes they want things confidential. I mean, you're going to build a storage place on the corner. What's the big deal? So, sometimes the parties want confidential, the deal to be confidential, which is a major problem from a tax and legal standpoint. And nobody talks about it. So it's very rarely in my deals, but I have had confidentiality clauses. That's not, okay, confidentiality clause is not a real estate transaction. It's a private contract among people. So technically, you're supposed to, this is my opinion, there may be lawyers who disagree, but in my opinion, there's confidentiality clause should be separate and not a part of the real estate contract, because confidentiality is a separate taxable event that unrelated to real estate. It's real.
And so, so can you talk about the last time this was used, and is it is the cat out of the bag of whatever they were going to build?
No. How about let's use a fake example.
Yeah,
let's
fake
use that
example.
storage.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say my clients were not big time players in the community, and well, I think this might be public knowledge, but I'll just I won't say any names or anything. But when would it happen? It would happen when your buyer has a plan for a space, but that there's heavier hitters out there that could just crush them.
And could act quicker and put
act
them out of
quicker,
business, or
make a
panic,
cash
or whatever.
offer,
Yeah. Well, yep.
Or sour the deal.
Yep.
Again, commercial, not residential. So you're in a contract. You're a small guy. You're in a contract with to buy something and build it out, and you're beating the industry to the punch, and crap happens behind the scenes.
Or if you're going into a strip mall where there's one person selling cookies and you want to sell ice cream, and the cookie sales, cookie franchise is like big, strong, powerful. If they find out, they could be like, "Hey, listen."
Yeah.
Whatever. They could influence the deal. They could get to the owner.
They whisper.
Yep.
They get to the owner.
Yeah, they get
So
to the owner.
you
I'm going to
want
be pulling out, this and that, whatever it is. We won't be happy.
Confidentiality
Yep.
when you know that your seller could be seduced or whispered
By some
in the
outside
ear
party.
By the outside
Yeah,
party.
they give your competition a leg up. I like that.
So, and not just even in general, like let's say Arlington Heights years ago, before anyone else knew about the Bears. Let's say somebody had an inside line to the Bears are considering moving to the Arlington racetrack. It could even be just like foreknowledge, and some of the polls, the politicians knew that, and stuff happens. From my understanding. So you want to keep. So even when what's coming, not. So you want to keep it secret, so you don't get crushed.
Yep. Okay.
But the problem is, it's how much of your purchase price is a confidentiality clause. And I learned, unfortunately, that confidentiality clauses are separately taxable events, especially in personal injury, in courts. So it gets dicey. But that's a tax issue. Go talk to your accountant. So confidentiality clause can happen. And 1031s, you guys know.
Yep.
Yeah.
We love doing 1031 exchanges. That's when a person has an investment property and wants to sell that and not pay the tax on that, leverage it for another purchase. You obviously facilitate those in conjunction with the title company.
You got really, us lawyers, we keep the clause in there, but there are, frankly, exchange companies and the title companies who do it. I would get in trouble, or I would be doing poor legal work if I didn't discuss it with my client ahead of time and put it in the contract. But frankly, then I just cooperate with the 1031 companies. Kick the can down the road. I call 1031 exchanges just deferring taxes. You kick the can down the road to pay taxes.
Still got to
later.
pay taxes, but not, when you finally sell and take your cash.
Yeah.
All right, Vince, we're coming up on the hour, and so I would
course.
want to talk just really briefly about the Auricchio Law brand.
Sure.
What do agents get when they get? We know they get expertise. We know they get experience. We know they get someone who has navigated the tricky waters of a real estate transaction. What are some of the other elements of your brand?
Sure. Now, you're so kind, and I've even had to correct some of the radio hosts that I work with otherwise, but we lawyers are not allowed to say we're experts.
Okay, so he's not an expert.
Maybe you can say.
I can say it. I said
you
it.
have an opinion that I might have expertise.
Yeah.
I cannot say I'm an expert.
Yeah.
I concentrate in real estate. I focus on it.
Well, Vince, there's this thing, there's like this 10,000 hours, right, that everyone says. Once you have 10,000 hours, and I don't know how many hours you have, but it sounds like you have over 10,000 in the sense of you reach a certain level of proficiency when you have time in and you have time in. So let's put it that way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, there's two things. There's the broad categories, and then there's the personal touch. And Steve, if I say this, it may blow up my face, but I'm going to say this. Lawyers are a dime a dozen, okay? I mean, there's so many lawyers. There's so many real estate lawyers. What can you get? What can you get that's different? Well, first, We do litigation. If you go to my website, this is the services before the personal touch. If you go to my website, we have a litigation tab. I get so many calls about litigation, but I put it on my website because I have a background. For 15 years, I was a litigator, overlapping with real estate. I worked 9 years for separate law firms as a litigator. So goodness forbid, my one pitch to some people, especially on my commercial deals, this doesn't hold as much on residential, hold as much weight. My one pitch is, if something goes wrong or we ever have to sue somebody or somebody threatens you with a suit, we are experienced with litigation.
So you don't have to job that out. The person that did the deal is going to argue your case.
And frankly, and I'm not ripping on real estate lawyers, I want to be only a real estate transaction lawyer. God bless real estate transaction, but I am experienced in litigation. What happens is, the second there's a problem on either a residential commercial transaction, a transactional lawyer is honestly saying, I'm not a litigator. I can't go to the courts. I can't fight, not over earnest money. Nobody wants to sue over earnest money, but I can't do a breach of contract. I can't do specific performance, which means I want to get you that property specifically, not just money damages. So we do provide and say we're a backup to our commercial real estate clients primarily, that if it ever goes to litigation, you don't have to pay a lawyer to catch up, you don't to reinvent the wheel and start over.
And that's a great thing with an agent saying, why use Vince? Because he's a real pro, not an expert, but he's a real pro, and he can litigate if it ever gets to that.
If it ever gets to that.
Yeah, and we don't want it to get to that.
No, and the point of real estate,
no one wants to litigate,
is
but there's
never
litigation going on all day long.
You never want to litigate,
Yeah.
but in commercial space, when it's a knife fight, when everyone's trying to
Might
screw
have
each
to.
other, you might have to. So we can do litigation. Secondly, back to the lawyers are a dime a dozen, the personal touch. Every lawyer should, but they don't. We CC our clients on everything. So many lawyers are like, I don't want my client to know everything, or I don't want my client to bother me. No, this is like, I used to call it a birthday. I love first-time buyers. Most real estate lawyers don't prefer to work with first-time buyers.
Emotional, don't know what's going on, all these kind of things.
More work,
Yeah.
more emotion,
Yeah.
more headache.
Yep.
No, and I'm not just saying this because I'm on your show today. I'm saying this because it's a birthday. There's nothing better than being with someone at the closing table, taking a snapshot with them, the face. I'm a people person. I love to be with people. So we CC our clients on everything. We include them on anything. They can call, email, text. Do I maybe spend more time than I'm supposed to or should? Maybe, maybe not. I hope it gets me more clients because it's a personal touch. Also, you always get a lawyer, whether it's me or someone else, you always get a lawyer who shows up at your closing. I'm sorry, God bless the mills or the big shops, but there are some firms send paralegals only, some firms send secretaries only.
We'll send nobody.
Some firms will send a Zoom laptop, and some firms won't even Zoom laptop you. They'll be on the phone with you, or nobody. Drives me nuts when I'm at a closing and the other lawyer's on the phone. Not if there's a conflict, not if they're on vacation. You're allowed to go on vacation. You're allowed to have a conflict. But as a matter of routine, you don't go to the closings with your client. Not cool, man. That's definitely not a personal touch. So also, fine, I'll say it because it's a pitch to real estate agents, that this whole team-oriented approach is also code for, I make the agent's burden light. I get the condo association documents. I track down, of course I rely on the agents to schedule things, but I do a lot of things that my agents would do, and then they love working with me.
That's great.
So
yeah,
it's
fantastic.
a business marketing deal. Like I don't have a single agent who has to get their own association documents.
Yeah.
And sometimes, those documents, if you printed them out, could be a mile long.
No doubt.
So, litigation, personal touch, or I say to the screen, as long as you have a competent lawyer, I think your real estate agent will go well. All I can do is try to care more and give the personal touch.
Awesome. Well, Vince, I want to thank you for being a part of this. I want to thank Carmen Carbonara for just connecting us together for this Facebook
Carmen.
Live and for our podcast. And everyone have a great day today. We're heading into the spring market, and I wish you all the best. Hey, thanks for listening to the People Not Titles podcast. We are proudly sponsored by Land Trust Title Services. If you enjoyed the podcast, please hit the like button, please subscribe, and we'd love it if you'd share our podcast with your friends. Thanks a lot.